All right, Aaron, welcome to Jay Burden Show. How you doing, man?
Great, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I love. Well, okay, look, Twitter's a horrible, horrible website,
Oh man,
but
and I'm ashamed of like how I behave on there primarily. Like on a daily basis, I'm like, I gotta stop this, dude. What am I doing?
I'm retired.
Good for
After
you, man. That's
I had a couple tweets go too viral, bring too
ah
much heat, and I was like, you know what? I gotta hang up the hat. And so I'm still on there, right? And the primary reason is because you meet interesting people, you see interesting connections.
for
And
sure.
you and I had some friends in common. And I saw you posting about Ernst Junger, who is
Right.
a major favorite of mine. And I thought, you know what? I got to have this guy on. You have your own show, but maybe my audience isn't familiar with it. So who are you and what do you do?
Oh, my name is Aaron Brandfast. I currently work as I do consulting, risk management, and due diligence consulting for a company that primarily works on the industrial base that builds the nuclear submarines for the country. So it's a total, total normal, like normie businessman type job that I don't enjoy, but keeps the lights on. But that's a fairly recent change up until, well, so I did 21 years in the Marines and retired in 2016 and immediately went to work as a contractor for the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, which deals with big picture, weapons of mass destruction, countering that stuff. But what I worked on was improvised threat and the threat networks. And then a lot of that, just because of you're kind of attacking these threat networks, you get into a lot of psychological operations and military deception planning. Which, and I'm only mentioning that kind of I'm working backwards or in a weird order, but getting exposed to this methodology of how our country and basically any of the Western governments that do this stuff, how we go about using deception, and like there's a methodology for it. And once you're trained in the methodology, you start seeing it everywhere. So kind of coincident to that, like COVID happens while I'm doing this work where I'm steeped in this methodology, and then I'm seeing the whole COVID thing through the lens of that methodology, and it really like kind of snapped me out of this like thing I was in, and I was like, I started to look really critically at our government initially, and then the whole kind of rules based international order thing that I'd been working for my whole life. So, um, but just my military background briefly, it's not I don't think it's the most interesting thing to spend a bunch of time talking about. So I'll give the like quick version. But I joined when I was real young. I was 17, and it's in the 90s, early 90s. And like I said, I had 21 years in the Marines. I started out as an infantryman and then became a scout sniper and then a scout sniper instructor. I got like really into the whole sniper thing for about 8 or so years, and then went to force recon. And then not long after I got to force recon, the government, against the Marine Corps' kind of will, forced the Marine Corps to stand up their own component of the Special Operations Command. So that was the beginning of the Marine Special Operations Command, and I was one of the founding members of that. So I stayed in that command until I retired in 2016. And I was in it for the whole GWOT, so multiple deployments to Afghanistan, Somalia, Iraq, and then as a contractor for from 2016 till about a year ago, year and a half ago, I was just in and out of Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan in the beginning, and then we shut that down. So in and out of Iraq and Syria as a contractor, I would go out and do like these 4 month deployments out there and come back. So that was kind of my life up until recently. Was all this military stuff, and then serving this, like I said, this order that I'm now very like skeptical and critical of.
Yeah, so I won't go too much into the military stuff because I'll be honest, I have nothing intelligent to ask or say on it, right? It's not really, I have no military background myself, but it's interesting what you bring up, right, with COVID, because that was sort of one of these seismic shifts.
Yeah,
Too young to really remember 9/11, but when I talk to people about the before and after times, it feels as if it is a before and after, right? It's a
I,
door that we pass through.
that's a very apt comparison because I was definitely a full fledged adult for both of the both the. As a matter of fact, so I was out of the Marines. I got out after 6 years and was
Mm.
doing other stuff, and then 9/11 is what the next day I went to the recruiting office and re-enlisted.
So
And now, now I see 9/11 completely differently, and I'm imagining how you described your audience. Most of them are probably at least very skeptical of the official narrative for 9/11, but I bought it. Back then we all bought it. There might have been the truthers, like the original truthers. You'll meet guys that'll be like, I always knew. Man, I didn't meet a single solitary person that didn't buy that whole thing hook, line, and sinker.
well, and I mean, two things there. One, obviously, I think it's fair to say that there are a lot of people who do not trust a single thing that the government says.
Yeah.
Uh, and a big part of that is we have been just habitually lied to. And obviously,
Yeah.
9/11 was a very, I mean, it was a very clear example of that, right? Like, wait, a guy from Saudi Arabia blew up a plane, so we're going to Iraq?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
again,
Yeah,
I'm no
even if you
geopolitical
buy
expert.
like even if you buy their description of what happened, which even that, two aluminum airplanes caused three steel reinforced buildings to collapse in on their own footprint. Okay, all right, you're right, I'm not a structural engineer. How dare I? But it's like, all right, fine, forget that. Like, let's just grant the whole story. And we did what in response? What did Iraq have to do with it? Like,
Well, exactly, right? And I think like a lot of people, I look, I was already on the fringes before COVID, but that supercharged the whole thing. And
yeah.
to me, uh, kind of a news hound, right? And I was reading about this scary virus coming out of China, and I
What,
saw the
like in
same
December? Were
videos.
you reading like around December time frame?
Yeah, in November,
Yeah.
December, when it was like, oh hey, here's a grainy security video of
Yep.
like Chinese guys in hazmat suits, welding people into doors, and you're like, well, one, they
Yes.
kind of do that from time to time, so maybe it's nothing, but it's worth being prepared for. I mean, it's funny. I actually got mocked by my family because I bought quite a lot of dried goods
Oh my
because I was
God.
a little freaked out about it.
I did too, man. It's embarrassing now because I don't even think there was ever anything to be concerned about. But the guy that I do the podcast with. We were working as, these sensitive activities advisors, working in a skiff, a secured information facility where COVID's happening, or like you said, it's the run up to COVID, and we're watching these videos of these guys, like people dropping, keeling over on the streets in China, being welded into their apartments and stuff. But and a little bit about the methodology of this stuff we were doing, because this is unclassified. You could go on the open internet and find the publication that kind of spells this out. But just briefly, what will happen is you'll get information. So I want to control behavior. I want to cause somebody to either do or not do something. Okay, or a group of people. So you have these kind of techniques you use to either increase or decrease ambiguity. So what will happen is, in the way we receive this information, and I see it constantly all the time, is you'll get either the observable first and then the narrative, or the narrative then the observable. And all the observable is so when you're seeing someone being welded into their apartment, that's the observable that backs up the narrative story. And it's not complicated; it's simple stuff. But it's like they know that we're, so whoever the day is, anybody that's kind of got the wherewithal to do this kind of thing, they know that our faculties are so degraded at this point that most people, um, it's like they're not capable of the kind of discernment it would take to believe that the stuff they're seeing on their screen isn't real. They're just, something has to snap them out of what amounts to like a form of hypnosis in order for them to even open the door to the possibility that what they're looking at is not true. It's that bad. Like, it's really that bad. This is like, we call them normies or whatever, but it's not. It's most of the people that are, in our world are this way. It's um
Well, this might be a cynical take, but I actually think that in most situations, that's an adaptive feature for most people, right? Like if you live in a village of 100 people, that instinct to just go along to get along and just kind of put your head down, it probably served you well, right? Like
yes.
you don't want a bunch of highly disagreeable
Free,
people.
yeah, free thinking, disagree. Yeah, true.
And
Uh
so like the
yeah,
problem is like many things, right? Like look at, advertising or anything else. What they're doing is they're basically taking an instinct that let your ancestors survive and putting their hooks into it. Right? So for instance,
oh
like
dude.
potato chips are a great example. Like anything that tasted like a potato chip to your caveman ancestors kept them from starving in the winter, right? It was
Right, right,
a
right.
ton of like, oil and salt. It tasted good, right? Albeit you, modern American, those instincts are being hijacked. And I think there's something similar going on. But like to
They
go back
do,
to the
yeah. Oh, go
you
ahead.
know, sorry, finish that thought, Aaron.
No, just to kind of pile onto that, like they do this on a like a meta level too, and because I think a lot about, you know, because I didn't have a any kind of interest in the military growing up, and I didn't have a military family, and but something like because I think about it all the time, and I think that these guys, like the propagandists that kind of need red blooded American men to go fight in their wars and stuff. They know exactly what they're doing. Like they know that there's these archetypes of people, and they know that kind of even against our own will, there's a certain type of person that, regardless of like what the reason is or whatever, if there's an opportunity to go off and fight a war, all you kind of got to do is like set the conditions for it and sprinkle in a little bit of like incentive, and people will respond to it. It's like because and again, this is just because of my own personal background. It's like something that like kind of has plagued me for a while, but it's like, the kind of common belief is that like people that go off and fight in these wars are patriotic. They're doing it to defend their country. And in my experience, and I know, I spent my life around these people, and I can use my own personal experience. It's not that. Like we may say that because it's like you get a lot of positive reinforcement for it, but that's, if I'm honest about my motivations, it wasn't that. It's just that like they kind of call the tune, and you go and dance for them. It's like a weird thing to describe, but I think that I responded to propaganda. So this is going to sound a little bit silly, but like when I guess I was 11 or 10 or 11, the movie Top Gun came out. And that movie blew my mind. It blew all of our minds. Like it like completely changed like all I wanted to do from that point on was to be a like jet pilot, like a fighter pilot. I'm building little models in my house, and I'm doing the whole thing. And that lasted until this television show a couple of years. I was 13 or 14, called Tour of Duty came on, and it was a three season series about these infantry guys in Vietnam. And when I saw that, I started watching that show with my dad, and once it was a few episodes in, it was like a weekly show. Like something changed in me, and when I saw my future, I like basically saw myself in Vietnam over and over and over again. Like I would just put myself in the scenarios that those guys were in, and it was like very clear to me that that's what I ought to be doing. It was like a calling almost that wouldn't have gotten into my head had they not. And my point is, to my big rambling point is, I think that these guys, like these movies and stuff that they produce, it's not incidental. I know for a stone cold fact that um, the Hollywood movie productions company doesn't get access to like aircraft carriers and jets and stuff for no reason. You know what I mean? Like the Department of Defense, the State Department, the CIA is all has a relationship with these Hollywood studios, and guys like Bruckheimer and stuff like that. They're doing, it's like this, like something happens like the capture of bin Laden. Okay, there's a lot of true things that are true in the zeitgeist, and things that are untrue that people understand about that, but they're going to make a very well produced movie with big name actors, so that when you think about that event, that you think of it the way that they've shown you the movie to think about it. They're putting history in, they're contemporized, they're making history extemporaneous in your mind with their movies. It's like a method of control, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that, a lot of that comes down to the fact that we like to view ourselves as rational creatures, right? I weighed the pros and cons. But to be honest, right, humans view themselves as characters in a story, and they latch onto those ideas, right? If you look at the word meme, right, what it means at the basic form is this kind of like infectious idea you can latch onto, and it's not really based in fact, right? Like there was no fact about Top Gun, like
Right,
whatever I don't know what the gross carrying capacity of an F-18 is or something that made you decide that's cool and I want to do that, right? You kind of
right.
slip yourself into it. And I mean, that 100% still goes on. I mean, uh, for instance, if you ever want to really go down a tinfoil hat rabbit hole, look at the connections between the people who make Call of Duty in the Department of
Mm.
Defense.
Oh,
There's a lot there, and I'll be honest, it worked because Modern Warfare 2 successfully psyoped me into thinking that the Bushmaster ACR is the greatest small arm ever created,
hey,
and I still haven't been able to rid myself of that psyop.
all right, check this out. You're gonna like this one then. So this it's like 2012. I'm in Afghanistan, and our I'm in a like a small soft team, MARSOC soft team, and we're out in the Helmand province, and our captain, like our team commander, had a Marine buddy that he went to like college with, that was kind of nearby, like an hour's drive away, with his Marine unit, like of regular Marines, like regular Marine infantry guys. We're at this like big holding area. So we were on our way somewhere else, and he wanted a detour to go check his buddies out, or his buddy out. So we do that. We go, we detour, and we have like MARSOC has different everything, different trucks, different uniforms. We've got beards. We look totally different. But all the Marines know like that. When they see like what we look like, they know that we're also Marines, right? So we pull up and park our trucks, and he goes to look for his captain buddy, and we're kind of like standing around, and we draw like a little crowd because these kids, these like little kind of young Marine guys, they're interested. So they're, oh, MARSOC dudes are here, so they come over. And we're sitting around the truck, kind of smoking cigarettes, shooting the breeze with these guys. And I have at this point in time, I have a Scar Heavy, so it's like the 7.62 Scar rifle. And the regular Marine Corps does not have this rifle. It's just like SOCOM has it. And so I'm standing there, and this kid's like, "Oh man, is that a Scar?" I'm like, "Yeah, dude." And he's like, "Oh, can I see it? Can I check it out?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So I like unload it, and I hand it to him, and he's like looking through the sight on it and checking it out, and he's like, "Oh, that's cool, dude." And he like passed it to his buddy, and he goes, "Man, that's my favorite gun on Call of Duty." And I'm like, "Dude, bro, you're in Afghanistan in a Marine infantry unit right now, dude, and you're thinking about Call of Duty." And he's like, "Oh, dude, I'm just telling you, it's my favorite." I'm like, "That's crazy."
So
But
one
it's to
brief
your point. It's to your point. Like I'm sure part of what had him, what eventually found him in the Helmand province in Afghanistan, in the Marines, had something to do with that game.
So, brief aside, uh, I've been scolded by my audience for going on a massive gun autism rant before, so I'll keep
Yeah.
this brief.
Okay.
But what's your opinion on the 7.62 SCAR? Because that's kind of a controversial gun, according to some people.
I know it is like so. I don't really. I'm not that much of a gun geek guy, but from my experience of using it, I didn't keep using it. So the next time I went out, next deployment, I just went back. So we had these. We call it a Mark 11, but I think the other people called it SR-25. But we had a 7.62. They were called stoners in Vietnam. It's like a big M16 that's
Mhm.
7.62,
Yeah, yeah.
and they're meant to be. They come with like a sniper scope, like a 10 power sniper scope or a variable sniper. I would shit can that and put the LCAN, kind of like the same scope that was on the Scar. I'd put that on the SR-25 and just use that. I preferred it. The benefit to the Scar was it had a underbarrel grenade launcher. It had like an M203 kind of grenade launcher type thing on it, which was handy. But it was fine. But to be honest, I it didn't matter that much to me because we did most of our fighting. We had partner force. We had Afghan commandos. So there'd be like five of us and 25 Afghan commandos. So like they're doing most of the shooting. Like it's not so important. It's like my primary like weapon system is those commandos. So it's like I didn't get a lot of time behind that gun, like shooting at people.
Fair enough. I just want to let my audience know I am willfully resisting the
Talking
urge
about
to go down an LCAN conversation because
uh
I love the LCAN. I've had
dude, if I had that kind of cash laying around, I'd buy a couple for sure.
well, here's the thing, and this is how I managed to fund my degenerate habit. Uh, if you successfully find something that the internet hive mind has determined is not cool, buy it and wait for the internet hive mind to rediscover that it is cool.
And
You
that's,
can continually flip high end optics for like 100 or 200 bucks profit. Point
is
is,
that is
this is
that the
not a
case? Like, do people think those are not? So I'm not real tapped into
oh,
like all that
me either.
stuff.
Me either, but like as with any kind of consumer choice, there are trends. And generally what'll happen is people will like something will go viral. This is the cool thing you got to have. And
Yeah.
consumers will say, "Well, I want that thing. I have this thing." So I'll sell it for a loss
Mm,
buy the other thing. And if you're willing
Yeah.
to be if you're willing to be the house there, if you're willing to say like, yeah, sure, I'll like I back when ACOGs were, you know, no one wanted them. I bought one for $600, sold it a year later for $900, right? You get to,
Yeah.
if you treat it like a rental where it's like, hey, this is a cool thing I get to play with, and then someone else wants to buy it. Point is,
Yeah.
this is not at all what I brought you on to talk
Okay.
about, which was
All right. Well, we could, hey,
younger,
we could do another one and dork out on like military stuff.
which, yeah, all right, fair enough. But yeah, so obviously, to your point about like the things that motivate men to fight. There's an old line, right? Men love to fight, and women love men who fight.
Mm,
And I have more experience in the kind of like combat sports world, and I think at least for a good number of men, there is that kind of drive, right? To do something to kind of like prove yourself and kind of test your capability. And again, right, like going to the earlier point, like I think that's an evolutionary drive, right? Like that helped you. But when you have this huge propaganda arm, when you have this kind of twisting of that, you take what's a healthy urge and turn it towards evil ends. So
yeah.
I want to go back to kind of a comparison and compare and contrast between 9/11 and COVID, because it seems like in each case there was this kind of like mass hysteria where people just lost their minds. And so if you're up for it, would you be willing to speak to what you saw kind of post 9/11?
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I was out of the Marines and I'd been in the Philippines for about almost a year, just about 11 months. We're doing like an executive protection thing, like bodyguarding bullshit. And I had come back from that and was, dude, like I was young. I was like 24, 25 back then. Basically, I'd gotten divorced. As my wife was leaving, she like ran up a bunch of debt on credit cards and stuff. So like all of my money that I'd earned kind of in the Philippines, I had to spend a bunch of it. I blew, frankly, in Vegas. And then the rest, I kind of had to fix all this mess. So I'm like broke again. And so I'm working at Rent a Center as like I don't know if you know what Rent a Center is. It's like rent to own. It's always they're in the hood always, and it's like if you can't afford a TV or a couch or something, you can pay like $12 a week so you can have one type of shit. But anyways, I'm doing that job and it's in the hood. The actual morning of 9/11, I'm getting ready for work and that's all going on the East Coast, right? So so the whole thing goes on. I go into work, it's chaos. The whole everywhere you go, it's like people are freaking out. And then over the course of a few days, things kind of stabilize. But even in the hood, where people are not prone to this kind of behavior, it's a massive wave of pro-American sentiment. There's every car's got an American flag. If you can imagine, like every car or like 70% of the cars having American flag like stickers or flags in the car. There's people waving American flags on street corners. There's people pulling Sikhs and Indians out of cabs in Sacramento, where I was living, and like beating them up because they think they're Muslims. Like it's this
Uh,
wave of crazy.
Including, I
Yeah,
believe, Mark Wahlberg. That might be slander, but I'm pretty sure he beat up a Sikh dude in
I can see it
Boston.
doing that. I can see him going on a mad one and like, yeah. But so that's all going on, and then what happens, in short order, kind of, and a few people kind of noticed and said something about it, but this rollback of our civil liberties just starts happening. Like, oh, well, now we're going to submit to this level of scrutiny in the airport. Now we're going to, what do they sign? What's the act?
Patriot Act?
Why am I drunk? Patriot Act gets signed, and it's like in an instant, the nature of what it means to be a U.S. citizen changed. So, in my opinion, whatever damage was done to those buildings, and the people that died in it, is small potatoes compared to the absolute kind of change in what it meant to be a U.S. citizen. And it's never gone back. They've never given an inch. You know what I mean? They'll change, they'll morph and shift and change the appearance of things, but once they take power like that, they don't give it back. And so, um, and then for me personally, it was like, um, I don't remember, like people will say, like they'll write country songs like my shook my fist with rage, at the red one. I didn't feel rage like that. I felt like an opportunity. Like I really felt, because I had been trained as a sniper and done all this like sniper stuff, but I'd never gone to combat and done it. And so I had this idea. I'm like, well, this is my opportunity. And, it was unambiguous. Like I knew instantly as soon as I saw that happening and they're like, it's terrorist attack. I'm like, I got to go back in the Marines immediately. And then it like, it worked out exactly as I like kind of expected it would in short order. And they did an kind of limited invasion into Afghanistan. I wasn't part of that, but before I knew it, I'm back in the Marines, and we're sitting in Kuwait getting ready to invade Iraq. And it never occurred to me how absurd that was. Um, I remember like us sitting around like a back of a Humvee in Kuwait, like because it was unclear whether we were actually going to invade or not. Like the UN Security Council was deciding, whether the weapons inspectors, had found something or they had enough evidence to warrant us going in or all this stuff. And I remember us basically praying. I was an atheist back then, but like whatever our version of praying for it was like us just sitting around listening to this like transistor radio, praying that Hans Blix, like the head of the UN Security Council, was going to say invade Iraq. And it kind of went down like that. And it was like it never occurred to me that I just bought it all. Like, yeah, of course there's WMDs. Like why wouldn't they? They're bad guys. Like they're Islamo-fascists. New terms started to be thrown around. Like oh, there's Islamo, and it's like it all just got right in. Like no. And I think again, there's some people, old school truthers, that kind of were hip to the skip, or a lot of the old heads from like that were alive during Vietnam were like, ah, here we go, like. But for most of the people I knew, it was just even my parents who were like liberal, ex hippies from the '60s, like they didn't question any of this. Like nobody, it
Well,
was it was full speed ahead.
I think one of my earliest memories, I mean, very early. I was at my grandparents' house, snuck downstairs, and it was just tanks burning on TV,
Yeah,
right? It was like right at that time. And then shortly afterwards, this would have been after, public sentiment has kind of cooled. I just remembered like walking around the neighborhood and seeing like faded yellow ribbon, tied around everything, every
yeah.
tree, stuck on every car. And so like I don't have super vivid memories of the kind of like frenzy, but of that like weird kind of come down where it's like no one had really admitted yet, at least most people hadn't, this was a giant scam, but it was kind of that uneasy realization that like, hey, wait a minute, this isn't quite what we bargained for. Uh,
Well, do you remember just kind of on your point? I remember distinctly George Bush putting his fighter pilot costume on and standing on the deck of some aircraft carrier out there and announcing mission accomplished. You know what I mean? And I thought it was over. So we'd done the invasion, got all the way to Baghdad, all that shit, and most of us everybody rotated home, and we're back in the States, and I'm watching George Bush on the aircraft carrier, saying, it's all over, and then less than a year later, like my sniper platoon's in Fallujah, fighting.
right, not quite over.
Not even close. And then flash forward 20 years, and I'm still in Iraq as a civilian contractor.
Right, right, yeah. I mean, it is kind of crazy that it's entirely possible for, and I assume this has happened at least once, right? For a father and son to be fighting in the exact same place in the
It
same war.
Yeah, it's happened a bunch of times. I don't know anybody personally, but I've always seen it. Like there'll always be like a little write up in Stars and Stripes. It'll be like Sergeant Major so and so and Private First Class Smith meet at the Chow Hall in Baghdad or something. And you're like, great, isn't that cool?
Yeah, I know the framing on that's kind of nuts, right? Like,
Yeah,
so one of my favorite Younger passages is it's kind of in the beginning of Glass Bees, which is a book I've done a full episode on, that will be linked in the description for anyone who wants to
oh,
hear me
cool.
talk about it
I
in
want
more
to check
depth.
that out.
With actually my buddy John, I mentioned you earlier. But there's this segment where, and look, it's a semi-autobiographical book, where he is describing kind of what Great War veterans were living like kind of 10 to 15 years afterwards, right? Interwar period. This was Weimar, right? Things were very
Yeah,
poor. And he talks about this kind of feeling of pointlessness, right? Like we were sold, this honorable version of war. The main character was a cavalryman, and he talks about, being taught about how to, to charge with your saber up, and then it kind of smashes forward to, him and a couple other guys basically storming a machine gun nest, right? That crash between, what was he was sold, the reality of it,
Yep.
from the perspective of someone looking back on the war. Uh, and so, obviously, you can speak to this either personally or as a group. But what have you observed among your compatriots, right? Other guys who were in the GWOT through the whole thing. Like, how do they view their time, right? How do they
I
view what they did?
I think that most of the guys that I know personally, they're at least willing to admit or kind of cop to the fact that at least the Iraq War was like basically kind of a nonsensical illegal war waged under false pretenses that were lies, and most guys that aren't completely deluded will admit that. And then Afghanistan, most of the guys will be like, well, we might have had reason to go in there, but staying there over 20 years was some sort of, military industrial complex boondoggle, right? But those reasons aside, like what I noticed out of a bunch of my guys, it goes one in two ways. They either use that experience as kind of like it's like a healthy thing. Like they've used it to kind of fuel the other endeavors in their life. They've kept that energy. Like these are high performance guys, that kind of keep that performance up. Because I was in the soft unit, so like these, you're around a lot of guys that are really, if they weren't in the special operations community, they'd be, in some venture capital firm, like trying to do whatever. These are like high performing kind of guys, right? But the infantry guys and some of these other guys, younger guys that only did like their 4 years and got out, are the ones that I really see struggling. And it's like I think it's the moral injury that they don't prepare you for. Like they train you, they do everything necessary to kind of condition you for the violence. There's no, especially like Army and Marine infantry units. You're not going to find people out there that are hesitant at all about the application of violence. Like I've basically never seen anybody squeamish about doing what they had to do. Like kind of a couple little isolated incidents that, but across the board, you're talking about young people, young men that are perfectly willing to go do the violent act. But I think it's what we're seeing in the aftermath is the moral injury and the kind of like it's people blame the VA, but the VA is just an instrument of our society and our culture. We don't. The thing is, we don't have an honor culture anymore. We don't have a facilitated passage into manhood or any of these other things that could prepare somebody, for any of that. And then, by the way, even if you want to lie to yourself that all that was necessary, well, deep down none of it was really necessary. So it's like you don't even get the benefit of like it have been in noble cause. So I think it's tough for a lot of guys. Like a lot, like even among my peer group, a lot of suicides, a lot of drug and alcohol abuse, just kind of like a lot of tragic ends to some of these guys' lives. And it's like, um, but I think it's because culturally we haven't done a lot of work to figure out how to help guys integrate that, and then guys just don't just do it on their own. Like I'm doing well with all this stuff because I've like invested a lot of my energy into trying to like I kind of figured out like I need to find a way to make peace with all this, or I'm gonna go crazy. And I got kids to raise and stuff, and so I don't want to go crazy. And so I've kind of and actually reading like younger helps a lot actually because it's like um, I don't look at it from a perspective of like just kind of like the stone cold facts of the situation. I don't really care that much about it at all having been waged under false pretenses and illegal and a scam and a psyop. I don't really care about that as much as um, I just kind of consider like my role in it all and like whether or not like I said earlier, like I was responding to some sort of like need within me to go out and do that. Like I they didn't pull me out of my like house and send me to that war. Like I went there. The war happened and I like aggressively sought after it. And so figuring out why that is has been kind of my thing. And then like just making peace with it. And then kind of like I use it as like, man, now I'm in a position to really tell my sons like what this all really is. so they can make informed decisions about what they're going to participate in and not, because of what else I read in Younger. So have you read Ooms Will?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so in Ooms Will, this is like kind of a dystopian novel about this totalitarian regime in the future, and this guy in the regime who's kind of like the stand-in for Younger, I think, but he's someone in the regime who has figured out that he's in a dangerous totalitarian regime, and and this is where Younger puts forth the concept of the anarch. So the anarch is different than an anarchist, because an anarchist is like a part of something, okay? And at the end of the day, an anarchist is with other anarchists, and he's kind of abdicated his own will and responsibility to make decisions over to this group. So he's a member of this group. But an anarch is just somebody who basically has made a determination that he's established his own system, his own meta ethical system and moral system. Whether and then if you apply this, like I apply it to my life, like mine would be Christian ethics, basically, right? But like you don't, it's kind of irrespective of religion or whatever. But like so a man has his own moral standing, and he's not going to violate that for anything, and even up to the point of death, right? But he's not idealistic about it. He will participate in things for the regime as necessary. He's kind of picking and choosing a la carte the things he's going to participate in and the things he's not going to participate in, and he's smart about it. And then he's also in Oomsville, he physically prepares like a bunker out in the woods, so that if things get bad enough, he has a place to go. Right, because he understands the cycle of these totalitarian regimes, and he knows that if he can stay in its good graces long enough to kind of weather its eventual collapse, he'll be good on the other side. But that's basically Junger's life. Like he managed to figure out that the Nazi regime that was very kind of um, taken with him and wanted to roll him into, like, I'm sure they wanted him to be like an SS officer or something. He figured out what the Nazi regime was and wasn't completely down for it, though he was, kind of sympathetic to a lot of their stuff. But he did that. He managed to stay in their good enough graces. He pissed some of them off, but managed to stay in their good enough graces to get a posting in Paris during World War II, and then come out of the other end of World War II not in Nuremberg or anything, and not having been murdered by SS guys. So I think it's just a reflection of Junger's life through this book Will, but then I apply it to my life where I'm like, I don't support our current regime. I don't think these are good people. I think they're dangerous. I think the degree to which they could become more dangerous is growing with every kind of technological advancement. Every time they have AI powered autonomous loitering munitions and shit. I'm like, okay, maybe it's time for me to kind of consider myself an anarch to some degree, and like detach myself emotionally and ideologically from my country, basically. And now a lot of people like, and if I'd have heard that a couple years ago, I'd be like, well, that sounds like you're bitching out. You know what I mean? Like you have this requirement to fight for your country, or like defend the people of your country from this regime, and you're opting not to. But I don't know. I don't know. That's the part I kind of struggle with. It's like, if there was some sort of opportunity to actually kind of push back against the regime and other people were doing it, you might find me involved, but you might not.
Well, that sounds very similar to one of Junger's works I have read, The Forest Passage,
Yeah, it
which
is.
is
It's
sort of,
so Forest Passage preceded Oomsville, and I think Oomsville was kind of like his second crack at that same like idea.
yeah, and I'm glad that you recommended that, because I enjoyed The Forest Passage quite a lot, and I'd like to read a sort of a more developed version of it. But there's a part in it, it's pretty early on, where he talks about like the value of consent, right? That evil needs your consent to work, and not to get too like woo woo and out there, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Oh, I love this
It- it-
metaphysical shit, man. That's my favorite.
well, this is something you see in like media as regards, right, like the devil or anything else, right? He gives you a deal. He wants
Yeah.
you to sign, right? He's not forcing you. He's not making you do something. You have to choose it. Similarly, right? Look at the Garden of Eden, right? He presents a choice. He
Yes.
wants Eve to, of her own free will, take the apple.
Yep.
And similarly, right, like you see that in politics all the time, right? Like, what are these weird neo pronouns? It's saying not
It's
only do you have to uh, not actively be rude to me because I look like someone who should be turning tricks down at a truck stop,
yeah.
but you have to, I will control how you address me, right? You have to kind of
Yeah.
cuck, basically.
Yeah.
And I mean, similarly, right? Like the masks, or the one I always go back to, and this is this is when I got off of any social media connected to my face. There was this trend going around in 2020 where it was very, very brief, but it was to show that you were, a good citizen, that you really cared. You had to post a black square. And
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I didn't post it
I
for
remember. Yeah.
reasons
Yeah.
that should be obvious. I
Why
wasn't
would?
on
Yeah. Come
side,
on. Yeah.
but I had multiple people reaching out to me saying, like, why didn't you do it? Like, why
Yeah.
didn't you affirmatively say this? And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I see what's going on here. Right.
Yeah.
Like and again, another biblical analogy, right? It's similar to, when Christian martyrs were forced to, sprinkle incense to the emperor. Right. No one really believed that the emperor was God, but it was a symbol of fealty, right? It's
Yeah.
saying, like, you will kneel. And that thing in Junger where he basically talks about, not giving your consent to the regime by voting in a sham election or doing the meaningless things they want to, because those compromise your, I don't know how you'd say it, but like your personal morality, whatever you want to
I,
call it. That's a huge insight.
I think that's a very important thread to pull on because it's reflected in other places in our society all over the place. And you see it in media and stuff. It's like you have to invite the vampire in, right? Like you have to be in some way participatory in this thing, because people like they'll call it divine law or natural law, and in natural law that gets confused because then you start getting people like, I'm a sovereign citizen, I'm not showing you my driver's license, those type of people. But I'm just talking about the way that reality seems to work. It's like there's very little, like, of course force can be applied, but that's always at the kind of at the extreme edge of these things. Mostly it's this offer, everything's an offer. Like all these people that are, it's kind of the new hotness is to blame the Jews for literally everything, right? And I think everybody that kind of starts looking at things critically might go through a phase of like noticing, and you're like, oh man, I'm doing a lot of noticing lately. But what I notice is that, like, these things that we're blaming them for, their offers. Like, when people say, oh geez, the Jews own all the pornography. Pornography is disgusting, it's destructive, and it's horrible. We shouldn't have it, it should be outlawed. Who owns the porn companies? It's these guys. Well, it's like, well, they're making us an offer that you are free to accept or deny. Same thing with like usury based stuff like
Hmm.
loans.
Yeah, that's exactly
And
what I was going to bring up.
like you signed up for the mortgage, and I saw that in COVID because, dude, I saw guys that I knew, that I'd fought in combat with, that I'd known for 15, 20 years, that absolutely agreed with me about the COVID stuff and did not want to take that vaccine, and did it because they were 2 years away from retirement and they had a mortgage, you know? And I saw it over and over and over again. It was like when people's livelihoods were put on the line, they were willing to take a shot that they didn't believe was going to help them and possibly would hurt them.
Well, and I mean, so treading into spicy water. So you know what?
Yeah. Oh, and
I'll
I'm sorry. I didn't mean.
No,
I
no, no.
hope that didn't
You
sound like
you
I
are
was like
you are
jumping in.
100% fine. I
Okay.
am modulating what I am about
Okay.
to say. But right, when we look at, for instance, like traditional mythology, right? Like the figure of the vampire, right? Well, how does the
Yeah.
vampire work? Well, he can only come into your house if you invite him. And similarly, right, if you look at uh, traditional European accounts of the court Jew, right,
Yeah.
which was a figure. This is not a slur,
Yeah. That's not
but
a pejorative.
effectively what would happen in places like Poland and Ukraine and Russia is that nobles would get into some petty squabble, go to their court Jew who had access to, more financing than they did, and basically said, I need this much money
Yep.
to, fund mercenaries. And
That's
they
right.
would start selling things off. They'd sell off the rights to toll roads. And if you're looking for sources on this, Solzhenitsyn's book. You can find it relatively quickly. 200 years
200
together, I
years
believe.
together.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a good
The other
source.
Solzhenitsyn book.
Yeah, he had other opinions. I'll have you know. But point
Yeah.
is, right? You can see that in each case, effectively, it's a choice. There was no gun, right? They weren't saying take the money or else, but
Yes.
it's a deal with the devil. And again, right to your point about COVID, like I had a personal situation that was very similar. I was finishing up my last year of college, and it basically came down to the fact of like, hey, if you don't get this, we're gonna kick you out. And you know, me and a couple friends were a little peeved at both, you know, pretty much everyone and also our university, and said, all right, we'll call the bluff. And it was a narrow thing, right? The deadline went past, and then they finally said, like, all right, you can do it, but you have to jump through all these hoops. But point is, right, in almost all cases, and look, like, if you are the hypothetical person that the SS or the KGB, who am I thinking of? Who is NKVD? Sorry,
NKV. Yeah.
internal, who has lined up against the wall. Fair enough, right? You might make some compromises, but
Right.
you're not in that situation, listener. And similarly, right, this is something that actually bothers me quite a lot about Christians, right? So I am a Christian. I grew up in the Bible Belt. I love these people. They're my people. But
Right.
growing up during GWOT, which actually you'll get a kick out of this, I went to full on Jesus camp. Like, if you've ever seen that documentary, we
Yeah, I
had
have.
a cardboard cutout of George Bush. We had to like salute, and we were broken into different military branches.
That's wild,
It was
dude.
nuts. But point is, the whole thing was set up as this big, like, you need to be ready to resist persecution. And persecution is then, right, Al Qaeda or the Taliban is going to cut your head off for going to church. And
Yeah.
obviously, Christian martyrdom is very real. However, in rural Virginia, I don't necessarily take your moral perspective super seriously when a year later your mandate, or 10, 15 years later, you're mandating everyone has a mask at your church. You've
It
shown
blew
me
my
in the
mind.
little things you can't resist even the most minor social pressure, let alone a guy with a beard and a towel on his head with a machete.
Yeah. The like almost universally the churches closed their doors. At least initially. And then some of them started to snap out of it, but it was disappointing. And but if I try to put a positive spin on any of the COVID stuff, I think like you have these events in life, I think that that cause people like and certainly I think combat was that for me. And then honestly, to be honest, I don't, and again, I don't recommend anybody do any of these things, but and I don't do them anymore, but I had these experiences with psychedelics that really, like I said, I was an atheist through all that combat, all those years. I was like raised an atheist, like, and I was kind of like aggressively, I was like a dick about it. I would read like Bertrand Russell books and like argue with all the Christians in the Marines and stuff. But it no longer, I could no longer maintain that position after some of the stuff I'd experienced under psychedelics. And so it caused me to just go down this exploration like kind of from a logical standpoint. And I'm sure you've encountered the transcendental argument for God. i
Yes.
encountered I encountered the I was like getting into philosophy and logic and stuff, and I encountered the transcendental argument for God in like syllogism form. And I remember just sitting there working through the syllogism over and over again for like a couple hours. And I'm like, I like logically I'm like, dang, okay, what I saw, I'm like, man, maybe it's true. And so anyways, long story short, that all leads me to like the only logically coherent worldview that I could find was Christianity. And that's not a great reason to believe in God, but it's an okay start. You know what I mean? And this is all happening right when they're closing their so I want to go to church. Like I'm trying to find, like I want to participate. Like I'm like, okay, it's fine for me to sit here and read the Bible and read all these books, but I would like some fellowship. No, can't do it because of COVID. And I'm like, this is an auspicious beginning to my like journey into Christianity. But I figured it out eventually. But like that's it's just if I wasn't already so determined, that might have put me off.
Well, I think for me, right, I grew up in the church. My parents weren't particularly devout, and I seem to be the only one who stuck with it. But to me, the thing that made it real, uh, was seeing like human evil, right? And not just
Hmm.
the kind of evil that's like, oh, Jim Bob is, behind on rent payment, so he knocks over a liquor store, or people cheating on their wives, but like
Right.
real, genuine malice, right?
Yeah.
That kind of like urge to not simply take, but destroy, right? Ruin someone's life for no other reason.
Yeah.
And that's a disturbing thing, right? That they're like evil is real. And once you kind of reason your way, or intuit your way, however touchy feely you want to get into it, the fact that like evil is real, you start to realize like, oh no, well, if this exists, I really hope that there's a good, right? That there is
Y-
something, there is like an right order to the universe.
Well,
And
yeah, there has to be kind of.
right, exactly, right. But I think that, and again, I love normal Americans, but I think that one of the problems of our country is, it's either called like, Dutch disease, affluenza, whatever you want to call it, right? Is that effectively your life is so good in absolute terms. And obviously
Yeah,
things have gotten measurably worse in America,
but they're
over
still
the last.
amazing. They're still, dude. And I try to remind myself on a daily basis. I'm like, it's still fine. It's still really good here. It's decadent even all the time.
Well,
It's like even poor people have flat screen TVs and phones and stuff.
well, right. And when you have that constant distraction, right, almost constant entertainment, there's a great book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, by Neil Postman, I believe.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
uh
I haven't read it.
it's good. It's like 110 pages, super easy read, and it has the added benefit of including enough Marshall McLuhan that you don't have to
Mm.
read him, and his books are
Okay.
kind of a pain to read, so it's kind of a two for one deal. But anyway, right, like he talks about this endless distraction, right? That traditionally the way people understood leisure time is, one, it wasn't, not everyone had it, right? Aristotle's definition
Yeah.
of an aristocrat is someone who has leisure time. But his
Yes.
definition of leisure was, pondering philosophy, going to the gymnasium, right, as it would have been in ancient
Yeah.
Greece, which involved a lot of nudity and oil, but it was totally straight guys. Anyway, point is, it was a process of self improvement, right? You were making yourself better. The alchemy of the soul, as Evel would have called it. But when you take that and apply it to just time you're not doing anything, right? You're just kind of sitting on your butt. And then on the other end, you have this incredible technological process which moves you in one lifetime from radio entertainment through television to the internet to having a
It's
supercomputer in your,
crazy.
with an algorithm designed to do nothing other than distract you.
It's
It's like,
crazy.
well, of course, right? The kind of harsher realities of the human condition, the existence of that evil, the existence of kind of transcendent good. Well, it's no wonder it seems distant, because, and I say this as someone who's guilty of it, right? Your mind is full of nonsense.
Yeah. It is, and though we're decadent, we're just impoverished in other ways. Like we're impoverished of our culture and our soul, and like these things that I think we used to all as a culture be more in touch with. And like it's although I don't think it's exactly hopeless. I think that you know I think there's a chance that things you see. I mean, you see some like cause for optimism when you see this kind of resurgence, like this movement back toward Christianity, back toward conservatism, and under kind of I'm kind of seeing it in younger people, like this acknowledgement that hey, all this silly shit that everybody's been doing the last 20, 30 years is it's not getting it. It's like I don't know.
Well, anyway, Aaron, we blazed through time. This was a ton
Yeah,
of fun, man.
I've really enjoyed this. I'd love to do it again if you'd ever have me. I
Oh, sure
wanted to
thing,
lay
man.
this on you before we get out, just since we were talking about Younger. You know about his brother?
No, I don't.
All right, so Frederick George Younger, and I can't remember. It was in one of the other Younger books. He referenced his brother, and in one of the footnotes, it basically in passing said that, oh yeah, his brother was also into the same kind of shit and wrote books. So I'm reading right now this book called The Failure of Technology. I got it. You can get it on Amazon. I'm like halfway through, and it's amazing. It's kind of like if Ted Kaczynski. It's like like a more precise, less kind of. I don't know if you've ever read like Technological Slavery by Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber.
I've read a lot of
Okay, all
Kaczynski.
right. So okay, so there you go. So
I'm
Younger.
not the only reason I'm on a list, but one of several.
So okay, so you'll appreciate this then. So it's a concise kind of version of what Kaczynski was putting out, but it's amazing how clearly Frederick Younger could see where we are right now. Like he could see exactly where we are right now, and he wrote about it. So it's a great. I highly recommend it to anybody.
One last book recommendation. Have you ever read The System's Greatest Trick by Kaczynski? It's one of his later ones.
No, no, I have not read that.
So you know how
It's
in
the system's greatest trick.
yeah, it's pretty short. I think it's like 60 pages. He wrote it in Supermax, so realize
Yeah,
he was getting this through what I imagine are pretty aggressive censors, so kind of read between the lines. But you know how in like the first part of Technological Society, he basically just savages, like just goes hard on like liberal protest people.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
This is basically his book about explaining why like the protest movement and all of these kind of like social reforms are a giant trap because what
Yeah.
these people are basically doing is holding the system to a higher standard. They're making it better. They're increasing how efficiently it runs. It's a really fascinating book. And
All
again, he
right.
gets into a lot of his critiques of technology with that, but it's like 70 pages. It's an easy read. Actually, I think that friend of the channel, Skeptical Waves, has a audiobook of it for free on YouTube.
Okay,
Uh,
I'll check
but
that. What's the name of it again?
The System's Greatest Trick.
Okay,
Uh,
cool.
it is both free on Internet Archive, if that website still exists, and on YouTube. But dude,
Okay, cool.
uh, if people want to find more of your work, what's a good way for them to do that?
It's very hard since we got kicked off kicked off YouTube for talking greasy. So we have a Patreon. We do about a weekly show. It's called Stranger by the Hour on Patreon. Or you could just go on to Spotify or iTunes, and then like we put on, after a few weeks go by or whatever, we put the paid episodes up there for free, audio only. There's no real reason to watch the video ones anyway, so just go to yeah, Stranger by the Hour on iTunes or Spotify.
Well, sure thing, man. That sounds great. I've really enjoyed this conversation and your
Yeah,
work
man.
as well. I'll have to
This
have
is
you
a.
back on.
Oh, I would love to, man. I love talking about this stuff.
Well, again, man, I appreciate it. As far as my stuff, the Jay Burden Show is available on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere you listen to podcasts. If you want to support us, you can either do that directly with links down in the description, or you can check out our sponsors, Axios Remote Fitness and Coaching. I messed up scheduling, so I got the honor of doing a JD kettlebell workout before this episode.
Nice.
And I'll be honest, it's really good that I have a chair and a desk because otherwise I would be a puddle on the ground. So if that's not an endorsement of JD's work, I don't know what is. Also, North Appalachian Supply for your gear needs. Again, Aaron, I appreciate it.
Thanks,
And to
bud.
everyone at home, oh, sorry, man, I stepped
No,
on
I was
you.
just saying thanks. Sorry.
And everyone at home, keep your head up. Life can't last forever. Good night.